episode of The Aletto Show right here on youtube.com/PWPNation. Hit that subscribe button, that like button at the bottom of your screen for more content from this channel. My name is Jay. I appreciate you joining me here for this very special podcast with a good friend of mine, Billi Bhatti. If you're new to the podcast, this is very informal, nothing that I take too seriously. We're just here having a good time and kind of documenting what's going on in my life and hopefully the lives of my friends and people who I meet on the internet. It's been crazy in 2020, crazy. I've been all over the place as far as the brain's concerned. But tonight I talked to Billi and we had a lot to talk about, especially his new podcast debuting with Vince Russo called Podcast on a Pole. Make sure you check that out in just a few days. I believe it's debuting next week, right before the Thanksgiving holiday here in America. So please check out Podcast on a Pole with Vince Russo. You're going to find out a lot about that podcast and also about Billi's career, what brought him to this point to having a podcast with the incomparable, controversial Vince Russo. So thank you so much for watching this. And if you enjoy the podcast, please let me know. Leave your feedback at the bottom in the comments section. It means the world to me. I don't know if you guys are liking the show or not, so please let me know. And once again, thank you. I'm super grateful for you joining me. And here we go. Enjoy the episode.
Because we've only got one episode. We've got one.
So I just started recording. So we're just this is very informal type of podcast, just kind of like discussion, just have some fun with it. But tell me about the podcast, man. Yeah, I'm down. Tell me about the podcast first, though, because I'm not exactly sure. I know you're doing it with Vince Russo. I saw the idea, but my memory sucks, so I don't remember. So tell me about it.
No, I'll say anyway, because there'll be people here that have no idea who I am or what we're doing. So I've been on the brand now for about 7 or 8 months doing news there, because I had the news previously, and then everybody was covering it, and then I said something about women's wrestling and how it was being shoved down our throats and there were better ways to utilize certain women. Like you're talking about the Lanas and things like that. And I had a lot of wrestling fans get on my back, and it was led by Ryan Satin, and I had enough complaints to get my verified Twitter suspended. But I still carried on doing my news and everything. And then Disco Inferno was monitoring it and started to notice, and he put it onto Russo, and I did a 4-way conversation with Disco and Jeff and Vince, and then Vince tracked my news for a bit, and I ended up getting a show on there. But during this time, I pitched to Vince. So there's something to wrestle with Conrad and Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah, very well, man. Yeah, very well.
So I wanted to do a version of this with Vince, but I didn't want to do this whole topic by topic thing that they were doing. I didn't want to just do a same version of the show with Vince. What I wanted to do is I wanted to do the entire Monday Night Raws and the period that Vince was there, but I wanted to do it month by month, so episode by episode, head to head. So he's on the WWE side, so we're going to look at the WWE and Nitro every single week. So what he thought of what they're doing and what he was thinking with the stuff that he wrote. But it's going to run in chronological order. So by the time we get to episode 3 in January 2021 is going to represent January 1997. So the 4 episodes of Raw and the 4 episodes of Nitro will be covered extensively on that one episode. So the whole of January 1997 will be the January 2021 episode for us. So he's going to break down everything that happened, all of his decision making, what he thought about the other side, how worried they were at this point. Basically, what we're going to get a whole booking overview of that month, and we're going to do that all the way through while Vince was there. The first 2 episodes, which are before January, because we're doing that in January, so that's episode 3. So you're probably thinking, what's episode 1 and 2 going to be? Number 1 and 2 is Vince's background. So we use the first episode to do Vince's entire background all the way up to WWF Magazine. Episode 2 is Raw Magazine and him writing with his views on what happened when the Monday Night Wars really started from 95 and 96. So episode 2 is a very packed show with looking at 95, 96 and Vince transitioning from Raw Magazine to writing. So that's how we use the first episode. Episode 1's in the can, and it comes out November 23rd. And the episodes will always come out the day after a WWE pay-per-view. So this is monthly, Jay. So we're not asking for like a big commitment from people. It's like 75 to 90 minutes every month. So it's so easily consumable because we didn't want 3-4 hour weekly show because we know that people will drop off.
Is this going to be behind a paywall, or is it going to be like a free podcast just out there? Free podcast?
It's a free podcast, yeah, because
great.
We've done a lot of stuff behind a paywall. Like I put my news behind paywall, Vince's stuff's behind a paywall. But he's got books out previously. But if you want to hear from Vince now, it's all behind a paywall. But he's got books out about his background. But no one's put it together in a chronological way like this and made him actually explain every booking decision and looked at the head-to-head war. So you can like relive it and you can use it as a companion for WWE Network because we have all of that. So episode by episode, you can watch these wars again and then have the booker or the writer essentially explaining everything that they were doing. And when you look at the modern day product, this will probably be a nice thing to watch because obviously we're not getting great content from the wrestling at the moment. But I am becoming a defender of SmackDown because I think that's become a fine show to watch. I find SmackDown really easy to watch for the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's been entertaining for sure. Now, I know you compared the new podcast to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. And I used to listen to that show. It's not a real video show, but I'd listen to that show, every week. And the one thing I really liked about it was at times Conrad was really hard on Bruce Pritchard. He asked him hard questions and was able to really get under his skin sometimes. And it caused for some very entertaining, but also seemed like genuine, real banter between the two. Now, is that something that we're going to expect out of your new show with Vince? You guys can get into it a little bit?
Yeah, like we obviously we don't want it to get to the point where it's just the same stuff where we're all just looking forward to getting to Bash at the Beach where he screwed Hogan and explaining that. Like it's not all getting towards big like crescendos because I mean even in the first episode where he's not even working as a writer at the moment, we're in the WWF magazine period. There's stories within that in terms of how he came into contact with Linda, how he changed the face of the magazine, run-ins that he had with Sable, and even before she was in a magazine where Mark Marrow was comfortable enough with him to come in and look at outfits that she was going to wear because he didn't think that he was a guy that was looking to hit on his wife. And there's loads of like tidbits. There's a story about Jake the Snake coming to his video store and Jake like throwing daggers to his wife every time there was a guy near her because he didn't trust her at all. And we were like talking as to whether guys who act like that are because they're doing everything themselves. Like the guys that expect people of cheating are normally the guys that cheat. We get into all, and that's just episode 1 where we expected to get nothing. It was really supposed to be very much a case of let's look at how Vince got into the business. But there's stuff there that the dirt sheets and things will pick up on. But as a week to week thing, like it will look at how booking decisions are made and how we get there. So even the small stuff, even like way down. So we're not just going to be looking at Brett and Austin and the people that are on top. We'll look way down as to like how everything's written for people. Because at the moment, I think one of the things they don't do, even though they have all the people signed with the companies at the moment, I don't think that they take a booking structure where they look on top and find stuff for Drew and Orton to do, and then work down and make sure that everybody has a storyline. There's only about 3 or 4 programs in the WWE where people are programmed in with each other. Otherwise, everybody just floats around and has pretty meaningless matches. And when you watch that period, the wrestling's better now, granted. But the thing is that back then, everybody's entwined in a program and you know what everybody's doing. So we'll speak about the process of that because Pritchard, he's not that heavily involved in the process. He's never spoke about the process and the whats and the whys and what goes into pushing a talent. Like he's explained to you numerous times why they did certain things or what plans were. But he's explained what plans were, but he's never explained the why. So we're looking at why, and also looking at like in terms of pitches that went for Vince McMahon and trying to get inside his head in terms of what he shot down and what he didn't shut down. Because if we listen to the show, you might hear about 100 ideas that never made it to TV.
Right, and I'm sure they're plentiful because back then, of course, you had all these different dynamics and personalities. You had Jim Ross working with the talent. You had Jim Cornette in there with creative for a lot of the time too. Pat Patterson working finishes. There were so many big egos back then that I'm sure you're going to have a ton of great, insight and some inside baseball that we've never even thought about before. Now, one thing I'm very curious about is when working with Vince Russo, because I'm a big fan of Vince. I text with him every once in a while on DMs for many years now. He's a really super sweet, nice guy. Now, is this going to be focused on positive all the time about Vince? Because I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding some of the booking decisions he's made and some of the major moments in WWE and WCW, including Owen Hart's death, something like that. So this is going to be like a no holds barred approach. You're not going to skip over any kind of topics. It's all going to be on the table.
No, I think that's why this is why I had to do it, because I've been with him for 8 months, and when I approached this, it took 5-6 months to get into it, because I work with him every week, and he knows he chats with my son now, like I have a 9-year-old who he talks to. They do bits. He promotes his Instagram account where he has his toy collection and everything. So the rapport has been built where it's got to a stage where we can disagree a lot, and there will be things that the booking of WCW 99 is not flawless, and I've said to him before, whereas I don't think it's the complete car crash that people think it was, where I can see what he was trying to do. It is a little bit like watching wrestling on speed. It is like it doesn't pause at all to let you breathe. And I even said to him and I'm not an ex-writer or anything like that, so I don't want to do the Meltzerish thing where you haven't ever been in a ring before, yet you're criticizing everything that's been in a ring. And likewise, I've not been in a writing position, but from somebody that has watched the product for 30 years, and this is my 30th year now, I can turn around and say, Vince, you didn't let that breathe at all. It was just you did one thing and then you just hot shotted it onto another thing and another thing and another thing. And whereas it was very much like TV for people with ADHD. It's almost actually 20 years ahead, because now where we're all on our phones constantly and we can't concentrate on anything, perhaps a fast-paced product from segment to segment where wrestling on speed would work a lot better. Then back in 2099, where you didn't need to necessarily do that, where it was almost too much of a shock. But yeah, almost it may work now. Whereas I think now Raw almost moves too slow. And one of the things where SmackDown has picked up some momentum over the last few weeks or months has been the pacing of the show. It's been a lot better. I think always the TV moves a lot better when it's paced out. I don't like these matches that run through ad breaks, and Vince hates them. So it's difficult we're not going to force arguments, because our mindsets are very much the same. A lot of the things I don't like, he doesn't like. He likes a storyline-based product built around characters. I like storyline product built around characters. I'm not with the whole AEW format of just putting on good matches and trying to get people over by making them competitive with the stronger guys. I can understand how that will work, but it doesn't work over and over again. When Cody or Kenny have one match a month with somebody underneath that lasts 20 minutes, that's how you get people over. If everybody's doing it on every episode of Dynamite, I think it's pretty redundant. So I don't subscribe to that type of wrestling. I'm very much like-minded with Vince, but there will be the things that we disagree with completely, because I have to approach it from that angle. Plus, there's another guy, my colleague from the Lingus Mafia, Cav, who's co-hosting the show. He doesn't have that relationship with him, so because he's new. So if we do find that we're getting too friendly, Cav's not going to do that. He'll hold him more accountable for things, and Vince knows that. But the thing is that whereas instead of doing it with a Conrad or a Matt Coon or whoever, he knows the intention is not to bury him and hold him. It's not to hold a trial and to take him to court for everything that happens. So, but yeah, 100%. It wouldn't be a good show if we got to WCW 99 or wherever and critiques. In fact, even before that, Jay, there'll be things to talk about in terms of. I'll give you an example. The higher power. In '99 was a big letdown for all of us. I when you remember, if you remember, you're probably about my age. I think I was at college at the time, and I was thinking about the possibilities of Jake the Snake coming back and all these rumors that were going around, and it was just Vince. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the Attitude Era gets so much. Is held in such a positive light, but it's not a perfect period. It's the best period, but it's not perfect. Like you can nitpick any time in wrestling, and nothing's ever been done perfectly.
Yeah, not in any wrestling show ever. Like I like AEW right now. There are things about AEW I like. I'm rocking the hat, you know. I
I
like
know.
the show.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think overall it's really good for the business. As just a general pointing, saying, okay, this business, this company's here now. There's going to be a lot of money funneled into this company. A lot of wrestlers are going to be able to make a living and kind of elevate themselves and be available to move over to WWE in the future when things get stale in AEW for them. So we're going to see a lot of movement, I think, in the future with certain talents. But I also do enjoy the show because it's different, and that's what I like about it. There's not much of that style of wrestling on the air anymore. I would say it's almost like a period of time in TNA when they were doing a lot of that kind of booking. But as of right now, I know you kind of were against AEW and their plans, but can you further elaborate on what your thoughts are on Dynamite now that we're a year into the show? Like, what are your overall thoughts? Because they have done some good shit, you know?
Oh, 100%. So I still watch it. I wouldn't force myself to watch it. I'm not. I mean, my podcast that I do with Cav, the Dirty Sheets, which comes out on Tuesday mornings, that centers around just covering Raw and SmackDown. So I don't have to cover AEW, and I don't do AEW news. So I do watch it from a fan's perspective. I just wish that it was catered more towards a casual audience a little bit, so they could actually compete. Whereas they bring people in, and the problem that they have is that here's the biggest problem with AEW to sum it up in a nutshell. They made the assumption that they inherited audiences from people that were already watching Japan and everywhere else. So AEW never started on episode 1. AEW started on like episode 101 from the continuation from the indies. There was no real reason for casuals to ever get into it. And in regards to how they go week to week, it is very much a lot of wrestling, which is fine because I enjoy wrestling, but I prefer it to be the way it was on the last pay-per-view, where that's where the good wrestling should be. And nobody can, if you didn't watch the last pay-per-view and didn't think that about 4 or 5 matches were really good, then you shouldn't be watching wrestling, because at the last pay-per-view AEW did, 4 or 5 matches were really good. The problem is that those matches would mean even more if you didn't have good matches on TV all the time, because the company is just built on having 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 matches all the time on TV, to the point where they lose their impact, especially when you're relying on the pay-per-view to knock it out of the park. Whereas the matches there were 4 or 5 good matches. There's nothing separating them from what you see on TV, other than the fact that they do a good job in terms of stopping big names clashing. Like last night we saw Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre used up on Raw, and they're gonna fast track Drew versus Roman, which they labeled as a potential main event. By the time WWE get to their SummerSlams and their WrestleManias and their Royal Rumbles, there are no combinations of matches left that seem worthy of that spot, which is why you see constantly part-timers brought in, because they offer new matches. No matter what you think of Goldberg and Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, there is possibilities for them to freshen up the product when they're brought in for Mania. Whereas, because WWE blow through matches, and I'm not even talking about pay-per-views, I'm talking about first-time matches on Raw and SmackDown, because you have to fill 5 hours of content a week. AEW do a much better job in terms of leaving that. I mean, I know they're going back to Omega and Moxley now, but the dynamic is very different with Omega challenging for the title and being a heel. He's not fully turned heel, but he will turn heel. That's a totally different dynamic to before. And also, they're clever in terms of they fill in potholes better than WWE. WWE will just leave storylines like Otis and Tucker and won't explain them at all. Whereas AEW will go back and say, we understand that we're giving you Omega versus Ambrose again, or Moxley again, sorry. but they're saying that that last match didn't even count because they're saying that you never beat me in a wrestling match. So they give a shit about cleaning stuff up and making everything consistent, which WWE don't. They don't seem to care. They seem like they'll make money regardless, because they're more interested in how they continue to raise their share price, which is their main metric. So as much as we complain, I don't think the TV product, the TV storylines and everything is their main focus. But what always confuses me is when you hear about Vince ripping up scripts on Monday or Vince rewriting stuff 1 hour before the show. To me, that comes across as someone that cares, which makes it even more bizarre as to why we get so many bad Raws if there's that much care going into it. This guy's so obsessive still, like he always has been, that he's tearing up scripts on Mondays at 6 or 7 o'clock. So it's such a weird time when that's happening, and you're ending up with Raws that we get, because Raws that have been good this year, you can count them on your hand, I think.
Oh yeah, dude, it's been awful. It's not even appointment television for me live anymore. Like, I won't even bother watching live. I'll just watch whenever I get around to it. Most of the time, it'll just be background noise. The show just isn't fun. Whereas SmackDown, you put over SmackDown a few times. I want to talk about that a little bit. SmackDown has been a lot of fun. Since Roman Reigns came back as a heel, this completely different side of his character that we never saw before. Some of us maybe haven't had envisioned, not with Paul Heyman. I don't think anybody really had that idea to put him with Heyman, although it does make sense in hindsight. But
Russo's very against that. He talks about, we don't need Heyman there. Heyman doesn't need to be there every week. I don't think there's any heat between Russo and Heyman, because I don't remember they're crossing paths. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we will talk about. But on Podcast and a Poll, you'll know everyone that Russo's got heat with and all the incidents. In fact, even this week, he talked about his heat with Meltzer began in 1991. So it wasn't even when he was... It began when he was working on a wrestling radio show covering the steroid trial. And Dave said, there's no point going to that. There's no point going to some symposium because Vince McMahon's going to lie anyway. And Russo, coming out of university with a journalism degree, turned around and said, this guy's not a journalist. So their heat began way back, which I never knew. Like, I learned that on the show. So Russo doesn't like Heyman being involved with Roman. He said it's completely unnecessary and Roman could operate as a standalone.
He could, but here's the thing. Here's why they did it. It's twofold. Like, he has a history with the Samoan family. He's got like a history of managing them and stuff. Yeah. And I think WWE wanted to make sure that the fans understood that he was a bad guy, because they look at their fans like they're.
That's exactly what I say to Vince. Yeah.
That was really it. But looking at SmackDown, the roster, the way this show is heading, and with WrestleMania looming around the corner, I feel like the main event for WrestleMania is going to be Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan for the championship. I think that's where they're heading. But what do you think, dude? Where do you think they're heading with that SmackDown main event?
I think Bryan, for me, is more of a Rumble program that I think that you do sooner, because he was taken off TV recently. And I think he'll come back. I mean, I was convinced, and I say this as somebody who's friends with Drew McIntyre, and I never knew that he was winning the championship last night. I knew he was winning the Royal Rumble and the championship at WrestleMania.
Dude, as soon as he put that sword in the entrance, I knew it. I was like, okay, like, he's gonna win the belt. He just put a sword in the entrance. Of course, he's gonna win.
Yeah, see, I knew about all of that stuff in terms of what was going on with the sword and stuff, because when I spoke to him in the week, he told me that because of the merchandising quarterlies that had come through, Bray. So there's just to take us off topic for a second. There's two different ways that WWE merchandise is monitored. So how to explain? So there's revenue, which is basically the overall total of what your merchandise comes to. And back at WrestleMania 36, going into WrestleMania 36. Becky was number one for revenue. She was the clear number one, and Roman Reigns was the number two, and Bray was coming in as number three. But the way that WWE monitor who is the number one merchandise seller within the company, so this is the public number they give out, which is revenue, which is why for years we were told Roman is number one. But whilst Roman was number one, there were guys with 15, 20 pieces of merchandise who are doing really, really well. And usually, if your 15, 20 pieces of merchandise are selling ridiculous numbers, then WWE will make orders and ask for new pieces of merchandise to be made. So there was a point where Bray had under 50 pieces, but they were selling so well that he was considered within the company as the number one, even though Becky had 100 to 120 pieces of merch and was number one on the revenue, because Bray's low quantity of items were doing so well. We're talking about the lanterns, the masks, the couple of T-shirts that he had. They decided to make a lot more Bray stuff, and that's come to fruition now. And he's number one on both sides of things. Plus, Becky's been off TV. Becky's the only woman in history to ever get into the top 5 as well, by the way.
Wow.
And she was actually number one. So this when people say, oh, they were going off her or she was stale or whatever, the WWE be desperate to have her back, because she was Ronda couldn't crack that top 5 and Becky was number one for a long time. So Drew was really hot with the merch around Mania time, and then his stuff kind of cooled off. So they did say they were going down this Scottish route, and they were trying to bring out this new line of merch that pretty much identified 100% with Drew. Because at the moment, it was just a lot of blue stuff with slogans on it, and they wanted to give it more of an identity. So I knew that was coming in the week, but I didn't know who was winning the title. And I thought what they did with that thing with Roman is just wanted to get a taste for, if we don't get The Rock, which I don't think they will, how will people respond to Drew winning the Rumble again and choosing Roman? And I think you can still do it. I think if Drew picks up the win on Sunday, and then there's some sort of backstage confrontation with him at the Rumble where we've seen in the past the two champions cross paths backstage, and Roman says, things of nature like, I'm on the number one show or whatever, and Drew says, well, what happened last time we faced off? Then you can have Roman interfering in Drew's match and costing him that championship, which leads Drew to going after Roman. You can do it many different ways. You can even get out of this match on Sunday by having Miz interrupt and fail with the cash-in. Like, you could have a Claymore hit, Miz comes in, it's a DQ, Roman just rolls out, and they start the new match, and you just call it a no contest, whatever. Because the other interesting thing is there's 6 matches at Survivor Series, so if the brands could split that 3-3, which is not something I'd think WWE would do. So there's loads of ways you can go. Just because the match is on Sunday doesn't mean that it's out of the running for WrestleMania. If it's not Drew, I don't know who's strong enough to get to Roman. There was a lot of mumblings about Big E, and he's the betting favorite to win the Royal Rumble. But I really don't think you can get Big E credible enough in time for WrestleMania. I mean, at the moment, he's been catering for 2 weeks, messing around with the Street Profits. That doesn't sound like a WrestleMania title winning act to me.
No, definitely not. They should give him like an IC title run first at some point. Let him build up some credibility as a singles wrestler like that. I think next year, if anything, after WrestleMania, I think that'll be his real run at the at like almost upper echelon of SmackDown at the main event territory. But bro, so tell me like a little. Let's just pivot for a minute, because I know you have I've known you for a while. I'd say a few years now on Twitter, and I know you have a pretty wild background. Big brother, right? And you've been tied into the wrestling business for a while. Lots of breaking news. You've been, I'd say, controversial at times in the wrestling universe, as I have been. I've caused a ton of craziness at times as well. So give me a little bit more about your personal background and shed some light on some of these Twitter controversies, man, because I'm super interested in how you've been banned I feel like you get banned all the time, bro, and you get shut down a lot. Like, what the fuck is that all about?
I'll be honest with you. Like, in terms of what I mainly do, which I work on the sports gambling podcast, I've been covering soccer there for 4 years. For 7 years. It'll be 7 years in June. I sometimes wish I'd never engaged with the wrestling community in that way, because when I lost my Twitter account, I'm costing myself thousands of dollars a month. I mean, I have a paid job with the Sports Gambling Podcast, and I run this site here, lockbetting.com, where I cover like the English Premier League, but I also on lockbetting.com, I cover the Spanish League, the Italian League, I cover the NFL. You can basically buy betting packages from me. And ever since the day I launched that site, my Excel sheets, my P&L, have always been pinned to my gambling Twitter account, which is at SGP Soccer. So that's what I do for my main income. I get paid to do that podcast every week. I do 3 shows a week. And then I have a Patreon page where people subscribe for various things. So you can get the full package, you can get all sports, you can just get soccer, you can get a combat pack, or you can just get bonus podcasts, which is the cheapest way to go. Obviously, you won't get the official picks, but you'll get a load of leans, so you'll be able to work out where I'm leaning towards with every game, etc. So that's the main thing. And with a verified Twitter account, that would make things so much easier for me to engage with people and to look more credible in that field. It's not a massive complaint because I'm doing absolutely fine with it. But the wrestling community are the ones that banded together to get that verified account off Twitter. And that all came about really from the incident about women's wrestling. So prior to that, my background in wrestling was when I came out of Big Brother, I got asked by a British wrestling company to manage a heel faction and to do some matches and things like that. And they semi-trained me and kept me unbeaten for a year. And I ended up losing a title match. They built me up to a title match and ended up losing to Martin Stone, who's now Danny Burch in NXT. That was the build up. I had a match with Rockstar Spud, who is Drake Maverick now, and that was and Channel 4, which Big Brother's on. They covered my training. So this Big Brother's Big Mouth, which is a talk show, and this Big Brother's Little Brother, which is a 30-minute show, which is just a fun show that comes on in the afternoon. So on Big Brother's Little Brother, once I was evicted, they continued to feature me on Big Brother's Little Brother and did my wrestling training. And they continued to have me on Big Brother's Big Mouth to talk, because the producers of the show didn't want me to leave the week I left on the 5th week, because I was stirring up so much shit in there as a housemate. So they found a way to keep me on television throughout the rest of the series, which was obviously a massive financial benefit for me and beneficial to my life, because I was able to continue to appear in magazines and just basically maintain relevancy for a few more years than other housemates do. I mean, even like on YouTube, there's a piece done in 2013, Where Are They Now, where they pick 8 or 9 people to do Where Are They Nows on, and 150 plus people have done that show by that point, and you can only pick 8 or 9 to do. So I was one of the Where Are They Nows, and that was only based on a short stint in the house. Like, I didn't make it through the whole series, but I was kept on the little shows, and one of them covered my wrestling training, which was leading up to this match with Rockstar Spud. And I was once told that my match with Spud, or Drake Maverick, is the most watched wrestling match in the UK since 1981. Big Daddy and Giant Haystack. So we did like 4.6 million on Channel 4 for the match. So yeah, I mean, I think the guys in the 80s, I think they did like 17 million or something, because that's how big the wrestling was, because it used to be a big deal over here to British wrestling. So from that point, I got involved in a podcast on the Steel Cage. And then eventually I started the Dirty Sheets. The Dirty Sheets came about because I started to get news. So I ended up getting news from the fact that my agency that signed me after Big Brother were also the agency that were involved in doing marketing for the WWE. And this guy who was involved with WWE at WWE Kids Magazine would get bits and pieces at first, because they would get stories that were going into WWE magazine like 2 months ahead. And it would kind of initially just be ideas in terms of who is looking to get a push, what we're looking to do with, how WrestleMania results may look. And then I, by complete accident, ended up meeting a second source. So I'm out with one of my guys from the Sports Gambling Podcast. We're in New Orleans for WrestleMania 30. And we're out drinking in a strip club. We run into some wrestlers. At this point, I already know Drew and Sheamus and a few other guys from England. So I already know these guys. and I run into Alberto Del Rio and a couple of other people, and we're all out. So we're there with like a few people within the WWE, and they're talking to my colleague from the SGP, and he's talking about WWE betting lines, and these guys find out, or are talking about the odds and everything, and they find out that John Cena is a 4-1 underdog to go over Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania. I mean, the Brock Lesnar was a 12-1 underdog, but nobody knew that he was winning.
Yeah.
But they knew that Cena was winning as a 4-1 underdog. So they were just amazed by this, and they're all starting to get his number, and they all want to get my guy's number. And like, all the wrestlers are coming up to go, hey, dude, can I get your number? Can I get your number? Can I get your number? And from that point, he has been dealing with arranging their betting accounts, which often are closed once you win a certain amount. So what he will do is he will find new places that will take their bets, or he will formulate relationships with people that want to split the profits with people that know the results. So he will find people and say, hey, if you open an account, I'll give you the outcome, but you need to give me half of the winnings, because I need to give half of these winnings back to the guy that's giving me the results. So from formulating that relationship, and because the guy works on the same brand as me, I'm able to get news from him. So I have two ways to get it. The old guys from marketing who are based in the UK, or the guys that are getting the pay-per-view results because they want to bet on them. So I'll get them first. And then I also give my clients the results from my betting service as well. So that's really it. It's not a big secret. We spoke about it on Vince's thing, but the thing is that I won't give out the names, so everything's completely fine. But from me saying that to you, it makes a lot more sense, as opposed to why people are talking to Dave Meltzer or Satin or WrestleVotes or whatever. They have no rhyme or reason, and they can't really explain to you why they're getting it. And that's why they're always not always, but 50% of the time. And the only guy I would give 50% credit to is Mike Johnson, and possibly WrestleVotes. Meltzer is way down under 25% correct now. I mean, I don't know what he was like back in the day, but I mean, he didn't become Dave Meltzer for no reason. So I assume his accuracy ratio was higher than 25%. Like, if I put a story out or I say something's going to happen, it's in the high 90s. It's a high 90s of accuracy, and that's why we've been able to get on board. I mean, Vince Russo has a show called Castrating the Marks, and there's no way he would associate with a dirt sheet writer unless the dirt sheet writer had ridiculous accuracy. So if I'm working with Vince, that means that there's been a monitoring process that's gone on for a long time, where he's decided that I'm a person that he wants to work with. And the thing is, that's what I was saying the entire time, like when I was over at Sportskeeda. And the thing is, once I originally hit the scene in terms of changing from steel cage to the dirty sheets and starting to be a news guy rather than just a podcast guy, originally everybody was completely fine with me and they wanted to work with me. I was working with Sportskeeda, and you can build a really big audience for them because they have millions of Indian fans. And when we did that, we got all our social medias up, etc. We then left there to work with Raj Giri, but then Ryan Satin contacted Raj and said, "How can you work with this guy? You should listen to their podcast and some of the jokes that they make on it." And then Raj told me to, if you want to work at Wrestling Inc., you need to tone your podcast down. And this was my very first time of that in the wrestling industry, where you could say, here's two things. You can look at it and go, you did the right thing, or you could turn around and say, in this industry, you need to be able to bite your tongue, and your own stubbornness has been your issue the whole time. I told Raj to stick it up his ass when he told me what I could and couldn't say on my own podcast. So I just said, I'm not changing anything at all. Like, we will continue to just do exactly the same show. So he had a problem with that, and then we ended up back at Sportskeeda. And in the end, we just ended up formulating the dirty sheets, because I told Sportskeeda that through all the base, the Facebook followers and everything that I had, that I was going to be going on my own at some point in September. So here's the other thing that happened. Once the and you can believe this or not, like it's up to the people listening or yourself. Once the argument started about women's wrestling, and I stand, there was a load of wrestlers tagged in it. I mean, I said, once it got heated, I said things like, I'm doing this and I'm in Prague, and there's strippers here, and there's hookers here, and all the men seem happy to be, using these services. So why is it now so offensive to have valets and certain women in wrestling being portrayed sexually? Why must everybody wrestle when some of them are absolutely terrible? Why is this being shoved down my throat? Why are you pretending that it's like a revolution when I go to shows and I know a lot of people take a piss during those matches? They are almost holding it in, or they're waiting to go and get their food when those matches go. Just because you're telling me that the product is great, and I understand that Bayley and Sasha have done great things even at this point in NXT, but there's still going to be a large portion of the audience that just don't want it at all because they're conditioned. And who conditioned them, Jay? It was the WWE. They did the bra and panty matches. They brought in Sunny and Sable. They utilized everybody in this way for a long time. And because they stumbled onto some market research and they realized that in order to grow this audience, you're not going to be able to engage the 18 to 49s with a PG product. So in order to grow, they needed to then all of a sudden get the kids, and this time both sides of the kids. So the business model became orientated towards getting the wife and the daughter, as opposed to always targeting the father and son. It was a business orientated move built off the shoulders of seeing Ronda Rousey drawing pay-per-view numbers in UFC. This was not their own idea, and this was not generated out of the goodness of their heart. The women's revolution came along. It was a business and a financial plan, piggybacking off Ronda, and obviously a way to grow an audience that they felt like they could get in touch with more realistically than the audience that they'd lost from the Attitude Era. So these are the kind of points I was making, and a lot of like wrestlers jumped in, and it was always portrayed as sexist because we're in a social justice era, which is changing a little bit. I think it was at its peak at 2017-18 when this kind of happened. So within those arguments, there were some responses sent to people that I did not recognize. Now, me being a moron, I had the same passwords for my Sportskeeda account that I had for my Twitter account and my Facebook and everything. I'm lazy, and I have one password. I don't do that now, but I have one password for every single thing: iTunes, Sportskeeda, Twitter, whatever. So the guy from Sportskeeda, who's not there anymore, 100% went in at this time and decided to send some responses to people that were flagged up as being unsuitable for Twitter. And at the same time, they subsequently chose to make their announcement that they were no longer working with me, knowing that I was finishing up on October the 1st anyway, which I believe was about 10, 12 days before the date. So yeah, they were not happy that I was leaving and decided to sabotage anything that I had set up. But that was just one guy in particular because he felt slighted by it. I speak to people at Sportskeeda now, and the relationship's fine. Vince is doing the Raw. Vince Russo does the Raw review for them, and they're happy to let him plug podcasts on a poll. They're happy to take stories from us. They cite them. They cite the brand because what I do is I put the stories on the dirty sheets first, and then I'll have a discussion with Vince on every Friday, and it comes out on Saturday. So just like we're doing now, we'll run through the weekly news. So I mean, that in a nutshell, like kind of brings us like up to speed in terms of like what all of that was about. But in terms of controversial opinions, I mean, that just piggybacks off the podcast. The podcast that we do isn't your post-wrestling rundown of Raw. We're not John and Way. Like, we're not gonna. You listen to that show? Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
So yeah, we're not like okay. So the match up next was this match. They did this. They went to the break. There was a near fall. There was a near fall here. so and so got the finish at 7 minutes and 51 seconds. That's not my show, and it never will be, because that I don't see the point of that, because everybody saw it. So it's very like opinionated. It's like it's quite jokey. Like, we'll make jokes and yeah, I mean, you just have to listen to it to know to kind of see how we are, because that's why I got Cav, because I had a good rapport from him, and I headhunted Cav in particular, because at the time I was doing it with my guy Nick, and Nick wanted to leave after the whole Raj Giri thing, so I needed a different co-host, and I was going to do it with one of my friends, either my brother or someone I used to work with at the Steel Cage. But I heard this guy just do this Sunny interview. At the time, he did a Sunny interview that the Dirt Sheets were covering, and I'd already been a guest on his show previously, so we already had a relationship. And he just asked her all kinds of shit, and she answered it all. And I just figured, if this guy's so blunt, that he's the guy that I have to do the show with, because he's the guy that will bring the comedic aspect to it. So, and we'll be able to play off each other well. So that's how we kind of did our show. So it's nothing like the other shows that are out there. I think if there's any show that's out there, I would say maybe Wrestling Soup-ish, because I always thought Wrestling Soup was a better way to approach it, rather than rehashing exactly what you've seen for 90% of the show and giving small opinions at the end of the match. It's like, why do a podcast that's 90% about telling you the Raw results and 10% opinion? Like,
That's the worst. It's the worst. It sucks. I can't stand this podcast.
So many of them. Like, I mean, that's the vast majority of the wrestling podcasts, right? It's the results and a small opinion. And a lot of people also will defend everything as well. And whereas, like, it's hard. Like, there's two ways, and I try and sit in the middle of being the guy that hates everything, because I'm definitely not that, and the guy that like defends everything. Like, we kind of sit in the middle, and at the moment, the product has allowed you to really do that easily, because when we do our review, we start with SmackDown, and the positivity is there, and then we get to Raw. So, like, you have that 50-50 anyway. The WWE have almost made it easier for you as a podcaster taking that approach to balance it out, because a lot of good stuff happens on SmackDown, and not a lot of good stuff happens on Raw. Like, Raw's the show mainly where you don't get the payoffs. At the moment, like with this Lana and Nia Jax thing, it should 100% have a payoff, but I lost faith in them in recently that will be paid off in some way at all. It just has to be, but you just never know.
Yeah, I hope they put her through a table every single week for the rest of her career. I really do. Why not? At this point, why the hell not? You're this, I think, 8 weeks in a row? Just do it the rest of her career. Who cares, right?
Oh, I have a really bad feeling that, like, Naomi's going to come in 1 week and save her, and they're going to be a dancing babyface tag team.
Please, no. Please. Hey, man, look, I got to wrap this up, bro, but I want to do this again in the future.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it's like, what is it for me? It's like 1:20 a.m. Yeah. So, yeah, no, we can do this like anytime. We can even talk about Survivor Series next week if you want. Like, it's fine.
Badass. Yeah, dude, I'm down. I love talking to you. But dude, one more time, put a cherry on top, man. Podcast on a poll. Tell me everything. Tell me everything you got going on.
Yeah, so I mean, I won't plug all of my stuff because I involved with a lot of stuff. I mean, lock betting we spoke about. If you want to check my records, just go to lock betting because all the spreadsheets are posted there. Or the pinned tweet at SGP Soccer. My wrestling Twitter is at DaySheetsCom. Podcasting a poll is at Tweets on a Poll. We couldn't get Podcasting a Poll, so it's at Tweets on a Poll. And the website's podcastonapoll.com if you want to hear the trailer. But the first episode comes out on November the 23rd. So you can subscribe on iTunes and everything. We have so many subscribers that we're already in the top 30 for wrestling podcasts on iTunes. We're already at 29th spot without an episode.
That's great.
With a 3-minute trailer. So we're like optimistic that we will get into that top 10. And we should do, because the show is the guy that wrote everything, talking about the best era. So yeah, that's what it's going to be. So just a recap, episode 1 is going to be getting Vince up to and past WWF magazine, and there's a lot of stories in there. Episode 2 will be getting him from Raw magazine to writer, and we'll be looking at the product in 95, 96. In January, that's where the format really kicks in, because in January we will be fully covering January's 2021 show. We'll be fully looking at January 1997 as a month. Every episode of Raw and compared to every episode of Nitro. So we'll be looking at both, and we'll be asking Vince what he thought of Nitro and what he was thinking of Raw. So we're going to look at things like quarter hours and everything in terms of when they're doing this on this quarter hour. What do you think about your quarter hour? Like, what do you have planned for a main event? Are you responsive? Are you unresponsive? Is your show booked and like you're stuck with it? And then do you have to be responsive the following week? You're going to get a real like insight into the mind of writing this show, which I think is so important at the moment when the writing of the show now is such a cluster. And this is the thing. Another thing as well why I wanted to do the show, the guy gets absolutely zero credit. I mean, two of the guys, maybe even more, but two of the guys that were there during the Attitude Era are there right now, Bruce and Vince, and it's not working. And so what's missing? Obviously, Vince Russo is a key ingredient that was there between 97 to 99, but the book on him kind of is the way, if you listen to the Meltzers and the Alvarezes and all those guys, where he was a guy that came in, he had a bunch of crazy ideas, he threw a load of shit on the wall. Vince McMahon was the real genius that put all his shitty ideas to one side and just picked off the good ones. And then once Russo didn't have that filter in WCW, that he was a complete failure. That is the book that the dirt sheets will have you believe on Vince, which is 100% not true, because the Raw number went from a 2.1 to over an 8 under the writing and booking of Vince Russo, and 8.6 or 8.4, I believe, was the max for that. You can look it up for the This Is Your Life, Rock and Foley, right? Yeah. So this was all during his time. You cannot discredit that and make excuses for that. So we're going to like clean all that stuff up, and we're going to talk about this upward trajectory, which was also an upward trajectory even when he was in WCW, which people don't talk about either. So, but at the same time, yes, to answer your question, which was, I think is going to be a concern for people, as somebody that does a show with Russo, will it be objective? Will we hold him accountable for things that we don't like? Of course we will, 100%. I do that already. I disagree with Vince all the time. Like, that's why I feel like I'm the right person to do it, because I'm not fazed by Vince Russo. Like, I'm not somebody that sucks up to I won't suck up to anyone in this business. Like, if someone tells me, even though they're paying me and it's a great opportunity, if someone tells me I got toned down or changed my podcast, and I mean, I can still be in Wrestling Inc. now. I could be at Wrestling Inc. 3.5 years down the line, have my podcast on there, have access to thousands and thousands of people, be, one of the like 1 or 2 most credited wrestling writers of all time. But I'm not doing PG shit and not being true to myself. I'll go and make my money in the gambling industry and do whatever I want in this industry and be able to like hold my head up high. Like, because at this point in time, I don't need it, Jay. I don't give a shit. Like, this is just everything that comes with wrestling is a bonus. And like I said, I was sitting there peacefully doing my podcast. I wasn't with Wrestling Inc. I wasn't with Sportskeeda. I was doing my news on Patreon. I was doing my podcast every week, and Vince Russo approached me just out of nowhere during this like pandemic and said, we were talking about one of your stories this week, and me and Disco want you to come on the show. Like, so it was just a revival almost that I was not expecting. And I saw you actually put a tweet out once where you said, like, it's good to see people come back from the dead or something of that nature. I can't remember what you said.
Dude, I always have your back, bro. I always have your back. Whenever I see you on Twitter, I have your back, no matter what, man.
Yeah, but I think it was even at that time because it was like I'd just gone back with Vince, and I think and then even immediately Saturn was doing the whole how can Vince work with him, and I can't believe Vince is working with this guy. Like that guy has tried to shut me down on every single thing. He files complaints to my podcast. I had a different podcast with Cav, with my buddy Cav, where we were covering the NFL and various sports and just doing a chat show where we would talk about current affairs. We had like a politics show on there. We had like a new, like just a guy chat show. It was called like the Man Show podcast. So Saturn filed a copyright infringement against us, saying that the copyright of the Man Show belongs to Viacom. He got podcasts that were nothing to do with wrestling shut down. Like he's just after me in every single way. Like I mean, and this is a guy who posted a photo of my son who's got long hair as a trans. He goes, he sent me a tweet once to the effect of it's funny how Billy's so transphobic. It's going to be so fun when his son comes home like this, and he like photoshopped my son into a woman, like a 7-year-old. So that's some big like rivalry or issue that's not going to stem down. And obviously when Podcasting a Poll gets going and it's actually out there and people are talking about it in dirt sheets and it has that notoriety where, you know, little clippings of stories that Vince tells on the show, and I already know what some of them are going to be down in the future. I mean, he already said something major this week that I will DM you about afterwards, which is very interesting. And I know that's going to be something that the sheets pick up. And once that starts to happen, he's going to try and get his podcast shut down. He's going to wonder why Vince is doing it with me, etc. And yeah, he'll continue to come after me. But he's really the only one. There seems to be a lot of people that have just made peace with it. Like RSN are using our stories. Sportskeeda are using our stories. Like we've never had heat with you. Raj Giri has a relationship with Russo, so we're fine there. So I think it's tone, and I think this social justice bullshit is sort of starting to wind down, because I think people are starting to realize that if we start to like succumb to it completely, then there's going to be nothing good to watch. Like it's just, and everybody that covers this is just going to be a mark. I mean, and we had that in MMA as well. I mean, not to make this even longer, but do you watch MMA?
Yeah, constantly. I don't miss the UFC usually.
Do you find that the guys who cover the sport are disconnected? Are the way that they appear is disconnected from the actual sport, because we have these violent guys fighting and it's a combat sport, and the guys that cover it are just the biggest nerds ever. They were the guys who you got nothing to do during a pandemic. I noticed it during the pandemic. You got nothing to do, right? Everybody's bored out of their mind. Dana White is trying to get this thing going again. And it's the MMA community, the writers, who are burying Dana White. Oh, this is unsafe. Dana's the worst person in the world. It was all coming from the MMA writing community. And it's the same with the wrestling community. And I don't understand why the worst people and why the nerdiest, most social justice people cover things like pro wrestling and MMA. But MMA obviously doesn't succumb to MMA is a real sport. With wrestling, they actually like water down the product and don't do stories and things in order to avoid this social justice backlash. And it's a shame, because originally, obviously, this was like a carny thing, and like we no longer see things where like we won't see things for a long time where Paul Heyman fakes a heart attack to mock Jerry Lawler, and CM Punk and Heyman laugh at him. I remember that segment for some reason off the top of my head. But things of that nature, we won't get that kind of stuff now, which will receive this like social justice backlash. I mean, I got some heat. The most thing I got heat about recently is I said on the Go Home show of Monday Night Raw that Bobby Lashley should put his knee on the back of Drew McIntyre's head and ask him how it feels. as the go home segment to give heat to that segment, and I was called all kinds of shit. But it would have got loads of attention, and back in 98, 99, they would have 100% gone with it. But I mean, that's just an example. I mean, I could sit here and chat shit with you and give examples of things from history and make comparisons all night. But obviously, we can do that on another day.
Yeah, let's do this again. Let's keep this going, man. I want to talk to you more about how the IWC has deteriorated into the cesspool of fucking dorks, and we'll talk more about that and much more. I'm looking forward to podcasts on a poll. You got a listener and me, bro. I'll definitely post whatever you need, retweets, whatever you need, bro. I got your back. So thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
No, thanks. Anytime. Like anytime, we can do this as often as you like.
All right, brother. All right, I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks,
yeah,
man.
send me that news too on Twitter. Send me that
I'll
news
send you
clip.
the DM now. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, brother. I'll talk to you later.
See ya, bye.
Peace.